Good morning, everybody. It's Mike Sasson. It's the Mike Sasson Show here on the River's Edge. www.riversedgepgh.com, or it can be heard on iTunes, SoundCloud, every form of recording. The kids love it. This is what the kids love to do. They love to listen to the podcast. This is what this is. But right now we're on Facebook Live. A couple things. First and foremost, hope you enjoyed your day off yesterday. Hope you had a day off. I actually had jobs in the past where you didn't have Labor Day off. Hope you were in one of those positions where you did have the day off and you enjoyed the sunshine and everything like that. A couple things. Number one, if you noticed, there's no Alex today. Alex, my typical co-host, producer extraordinaire, is actually right now on a cruise ship heading to the Caribbean with her family. So she's living the life. She was like, Mike, I can take about 6 weeks of you, and then I need a break. But so we have a very special guest today. Obviously, it's an election year. If you just crawled under your rock, again, it's the end of summer. So now you're getting into the point to where you're sitting there saying, okay, what is happening in the world? What's happening in the world? There's an election this year. Now, obviously, there's the one for the presidency, and we've talked about that on this show, and we'll even touch upon that today. But the way you make change, if you feel there needs to be change, is through local elections. And what I have on my left is a woman who's running for Congress from the 12th Congressional District, Erin McClelland. Thank you very much for coming out to the show and hanging out with us here in beautiful Millville, Pennsylvania.
Thank you for having me.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I just, full disclosure, I've met this woman in the past, and I hope you're as open as you were the last time.
I can promise I will be.
Yes, good. I don't want talking points. This interview will be 10 minutes long if you're just like, well, I'm about freedom and American way, and I'm just like, well, thank you very much. Let's play some music.
No, much to my campaign's dismay, I do not do the talking point thing. I'm a straight shooter, heart on my sleeve.
That's good. Now, one thing, if you don't know, like you're sitting there right now at home or you're listening, you're like, am I in District 12 in Western Pennsylvania? Now, to my dismay, that's not an easy question to answer. That's not something to where it's like, oh, if you're in Allegheny County, yes, or if you're in Cambria or you're in Beaver. And I'll use the word, it's the most gerrymandered district I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it literally stretches from the Ohio border all the way through to like Johnstown, all the way there. But the thing about it is, it's like, this is how weird it is. Right now, we're filming and recording in Millville, Pennsylvania. Right now, someone who lives in this town, you're not part of District 12. But if you're up the street in Shaler, yes, you are. And this is how weird it is. Like, I had to figure it out myself. Like, where I grew up in Aspinwall, yes, you are.
Yes.
If you're across in Sharpsburg, no, you're not.
No, you're not.
And then you also spoke about the fact that in Monroeville, specifically, the mayor of Monroeville, representing the town of Monroeville, is 3 congressional districts.
Yes, they have 3 different congressional representatives for Monroeville.
So if something happens, God forbid, in Monroeville, and they need federal assistance from their congressman, the mayor of Monroeville has to call 3 people or have 3 people agree upon it.
Absolutely.
This is why you need to vote, people.
Yeah.
Every November when you're sitting at home going, oh, well, this guy, you especially now when people sit there and they might say, oh, both I don't like either one of these presidential people, or I'm going to vote for Willy Wonka because Gene Wilder died or whatever. Then you're sitting there, but you know what? Then someone goes to Congress that maybe you don't want, or someone, becomes the state representative, and that's how, the fact that we almost light our bridges on fire. That's what happens.
Exactly.
Now, personally, you're anti-bridge lighting on fire, right?
Yes, I'm completely against that.
Yeah. Some people aren't. But also, of course, replacing Alex for just this 1 week is Brian from River Talk. Brian, thank you very much for hanging out with us today. We're going to have a lot of fun today.
I'm a card-carrying union member, Mike, and I did have to work tomorrow. So the union holiday, I had to work when everyone else was not in a union.
You worked yesterday.
Yeah, I worked every day. Yeah,
I
work
every day.
Yeah,
that's the working man.
That's right.
The Rush songs it was about you, even though you weren't born yet.
They were foresight.
Your life is a walking Bruce Springsteen song. That's basically right. What it comes down to. Mine is a Air Supply song. It's very weird. But let's get right down into it. Now, Erin grew up locally in the Valley.
I did, in the Allakiski Valley.
And now, if you're not aware, was always weird because I grew up in Aspinwall. I think personally because they just wanted the demographics of like the Fox Chapel area. They always included us in like the Valley News Dispatch.
Oh, that's so nice of them.
Yeah, isn't it? Yeah. So they could
They're
sell.
so sweet.
Yeah, so they could sell the. So technically, we'd always be in like the high school football previews and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like we never, we never knew necessarily what the Valley was until I then worked at the Mills. And then everybody was like, yeah, from the Valley, New Canaan, and Lower Borough and everything. So you grew up there. And then after, where'd you go to school?
I went to St. Joe's.
Okay.
I was a bad Catholic school girl.
We'll leave that be. Running for Congress, man. Now you went then, and then and where'd you go? College?
Pitt for my undergrad, and then Chatham for my master's degree. So
Okay.
all local.
All right, all local. Yeah, local. Have you ever actually left the state of Pennsylvania?
A couple times, but I just come back in a week. I haven't made it very far. I love it here. I'm such a blue collar girl, and everybody from the Valley is. They're just straight shooters. They're honest. They're in your face. They have a great time. They're loyal. They're very community oriented, and I love it. My whole family's there. I have a big Irish family. My grandfather had 9 brothers and sisters, and the majority of them live there, and my cousins live there, and we grew up on the rivers, water skiing and boating, and I just love it around here. I've never wanted to leave.
Now after school, you set up a drug treatment center in Blawnox, or go to that story.
Yeah, I worked in drug and alcohol for quite a while, and I did
treatment.
Yeah. I know I have to clarify that. People get the wrong idea. I worked in that field for quite a while, and I did everything in it from research, policy, treatment, in the whole 9 yards. And didn't like how that industry was going and how we were treating addicts. So I actually started doing some research nationwide, and then it led me to some programs that were working in Israel and Russia. And I found this model called orthomolecular medicine. And what it is it means the right molecule. So you're looking for the underlying cause of some of these things. And the thing with addiction that always frustrated me was you see addicts and you look at them and they're very thin. They have a lot of muscle wasting. There's physical symptoms that they're demonstrating that are very medical. And this industry treats them like it's all in their head. But if you look, these are people that are physically sick. And so my frustration was, how are they going to stop using and move forward with their lives if they are physically ill from all of the garbage they've been putting in their bodies for so long? So I wanted to figure out, what those drugs were doing that were causing them to look like how they looked and feel how they felt and have the physical symptoms they had, because a lot of them were similar. So we did a lot of biochemical testing on our patients and found a lot of consistency in what was happening to them physically. So we built a treatment program that actually addressed those physical problems, biochemical disruptions and imbalances, and restored appropriate levels of those endogenous vitamins, minerals, amino acids, those kind of basic building blocks of everything that happens in our body, every chemical interaction. And once you do that, then people start to feel better, they start to function better, and it's a lot easier for them to move forward with their recovery. So I started that program in Blawnox in 2006, and it ended up being the first and only licensed orthomolecular medical center in the state of Pennsylvania. So we were licensed by the state, got audited regularly, checked for compliance with any other state reg that any other drug and alcohol treatment program had to maintain. So I was very, very proud of that.
So first and foremost, I understood most of those words, and but so the thing that got me is I'm looking through your background now. Most of the people, at least my assumption, most of the people that run for Congress, run for political office, they more or less usually go into 2 categories: they're lawyers or they're business people. Mm-hmm. So then, how does someone in that field eventually sit there and say, okay, I'm going to run for the United States Congress?
Well, there's a few different reasons. First of all, I'm a therapist by trade, so I solve people's problems. Lawyers throw money at problems. So I think when you look at the fact that I think the last time I checked, 75% of the people in Congress are lawyers. So you have people that literally look at a problem and say, should we throw money at it or take money away from it? And that's it. It's very binary and not very dynamic. Where my life is sitting one-on-one with people and looking at all of the system that is their life, from their relationships, their job, their health, their children, everything. I mean, their history. everything that's contributing to whatever issues they're dealing with, and trying to find a way to navigate through that in a way that helps them and supports everything around them. And that's exactly what I think you need in Congress. So I think that having more people.
But specifically, like, what was the moment, or when was? I mean, describe, like, because to me, like, I'm
like the
thinking,
impetus for me saying I'm going to do this lunacy.
Yeah, because to be honest with you, like, one of the questions I wanted to ask, and we'll ask it
Sure.
right now since it's my show and I can do it,
Sure.
is okay, how do you run for Congress? Like, if Mike Sasson said, okay, I want to run for Congress in 2 years,
Yeah.
what do I got to do? What's the process? What do I got to do?
It's a great question, because I had to go through that. I mean, I had been politically active, but I hadn't been involved in the committee structure or actually in the political infrastructure. So I had to figure out what to do. And the first thing I did was just started calling people I know. Anybody that had influence or had been around a long time or knew people. And I talked to a great woman who used to host a radio show called Women Mean Business. And she had interviewed me quite a few times. She was an old friend of mine, Suzanne Kaplan. And we had a meeting, and we started talking about me wanting to do this. And I had no idea how to even begin. And she said, I'm going to help you. And she knew a ton of people. So she actually introduced me to a woman that was connected to somebody else. And somehow through that chain, I ended up with my first campaign manager. And that person.
So it really comes down to who you know.
Yeah, it does. Because, I mean, Pittsburgh's not a very big city. So if you know even a moderate amount of people, eventually you'll find somebody that's politically active and in the infrastructure and can funnel you in.
Now, what got you to that point to where you said, hey, I want to do this?
Yeah, I've always been interested in politics. I ran for, I did the whole class officer thing in high school, and I've always been politically active.
Were you your class president?
I was, yeah. I was class president and class vice president when I was a sophomore. And then I dumped my boyfriend my senior year, and he ran against me and ousted me. So it was one of those things where there were two girls running and one guy, and the girls split the girl vote and the guy won. So I learned a lot about politics from that race.
And that, the sad part about it is that's exactly what's happening at the presidential
yeah,
level
exactly.
right now. It's literally this morning part of modern life is you wake up every morning, and I have the CNN app. So you wake up every morning and you're like, oh, what a beautiful day. And then you look, you go, hey, there was a train derailment in Pakistan, 300 dead. You're like, oh, well, better go get an Egg McMuffin.
Yeah.
But like, then this one was shot. If you haven't checked this morning, according to, even though I personally believe he's had a lousy couple weeks, Donald Trump is up by 3 points nationally, and they broke it down by demographic, and it was just like you say, right now it's single women going huge towards Hillary Clinton, married women going towards Donald Trump, so on and so forth. So even in that situation, you learn that, a lot of times it is, the demographics and everything like that.
Race, yeah.
So you're politically active, obviously, in terms of, when you're working in drug and alcohol, rehabilitation, you had to, deal with the federal government,
Sure.
the state government, everything like that. So was there a moment where you sat there and went like, okay, this is screwed up.
Yeah.
I've got to do something to get into the power structure to really help people.
Yeah, there was. But I mean, as I was working, I never was one of those people. You're not taught as a woman you can run for office. I never actually thought that I was going to do anything in politics of any substance. And then starting my business, I think, was very empowering, because this was something nobody had done. So I was like, wow, I might be smart enough to really do something phenomenal in politics if I want to. And then Jack Murtha died. He was my congressman at the time. And Mark Kurtz got that seat, and that was fine. This had been a Democratic district my whole life. And then one day, I will never forget the 2012 election. I woke up the next day, and I had been an Obama supporter, and he won. But I looked at the congressional race, and Mark Kurtz had lost. And I said, what just happened? This isn't possible. And I started doing a little more research on the guy that won. And one of the first things he did after he won was vote against the Violence Against Women Act and sign the Americans for Tax Reform Pledge. Now, I had done economic training under Treasury Secretary O'Neill when he came back to Pittsburgh. And one of the things that he said was those tax pledges are insane. Those were the words he used.
And by the way, former Treasury Secretary O'Neill was under the Bush administration.
Yes.
So it wasn't exactly a Clinton appointee or something like that.
No,
he was pretty staunch Republican. For him to say that the Tea Party pledge of essentially that for every tax that you would levy, you would have to take one away or something, like a bunch of different stuffs that.
Yeah, he basically, as a businessman and somebody that ran a Fortune 100 company and ran it very successfully, said you don't take revenue off the table. Nobody takes revenue off the table, ever. And the minute you do that, the minute that you say that no matter what we experience, whether it be a natural disaster, an act of war, how do you sign a tax pledge? Knowing that if we have a massive act of war committed against this nation and we need revenue to fund our troops, that you're going to take that off the table. How irresponsible does that get? So I see this.
So the pledge that he signed was if, obviously hopefully not going to, China invades, whatever.
New Hampshire.
Goes around and goes to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And sits there and says, okay, we have to start World War III. According to the tax pledge that he said,
he can't get new revenue.
It has to be existing revenue.
Yeah, and which means you would have to defund a bunch of other things. So yeah, that's what they basically said. And I just think it's appalling and it's irresponsible and it's creating an idea that politics can be very binary and black and white, and it can't. There's way too much gray area going on, and you have to have really constructive conversations about what we need to do. Our tax code is not something that's going to become self-aware and come and eat your pets. It's simply a way to fund the things that we need. We need roads, we need bridges, we need funding for our troops.
Now, to play the devil's advocate, what people always say is, we're $19 trillion in debt.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to start cutting or we're going to have major issues down the road.
Yeah, well, good luck trying to cut your way out of that. And if you look at the average American family, you have so many expenses per month that you can't cut your way out of, whether it be your mortgage or your rent, food, heat, basic stuff, gas to get to work, however you want to allocate that. You can only cut yourself so far before you're not able to function anymore. Now, yeah, you could talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. I've never really seen a government official go in there with an understanding of what waste, fraud, and abuse is or how to cut it. And that's another thing I'm very interested in, is I actually studied lean process improvement on how to actually take policies that aren't working and process improve your way through them. These people use those words, but they have absolutely no plan whatsoever to solve that problem other than a hack job. And you can't do it that way. You can't just cut funding. You have to process improve your way through it. And you look at any business where they say, well, we need to cut here. Well, yeah, they usually will make some cuts, but at the end of the day, they're saying, okay, how can we save money? Well, we're wasting too much on this, and we're wasting too much on that. Let's make these systems
because that's always the thing that, especially, I think your opponent has a business background.
No, he's a intellectual properties attorney.
Well, yeah. Is he? I don't, who knows? I thought he was according to what he read, I thought he read that he was in business, or maybe that's what he counts as business. I don't know. Or
I don't think he's ever made a payroll.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's his big thing. All right. So basically, he says that the problem is that it's almost like you starve it to death. You make it to where you make it that people have to eventually make difficult, quote unquote, difficult decisions and everything like that. Now, I mean, I guess then if you're sitting there saying, well, you can't cut yourself, you have to grow revenue. Now people are going to sit there and say that's French for raising taxes.
Mm-hmm. No, it's English for raising taxes. But so we have a choice. You can actually work to process improve, which I really want to do, which I have the training to do, which I have a history of actually doing in the private sector. So take, for instance, medical errors. We talk about healthcare. Healthcare is our number one greatest expense, $127 trillion in liabilities on our nation's balance sheet. 2/3 of that is healthcare expenses. These expenses are exploding. Nobody is having a real conversation about why or how we fix that. And if you look at it, we have an extraordinary number of medical errors and hospital-acquired infections every year. And there's a very long answer to why that's happened. It's been sort of a 70-year process of dysfunction in our healthcare system. But right now, we kill 3 to 4 jumbo jets full of people every day in our healthcare system. This costs us $1.2 trillion a year. So while the right and the left want to fight about how we do a payer structure or who we defund or who we start funding, I want to go in and do exactly what I did in the private sector and teach healthcare agencies how to eliminate medical errors at root cause. No capital infusion required, no additional software required. It's just a process improvement, but it requires absolute transparency and a blame-free environment. when people in the right of our political structure say, I want transparency, and then they run around blaming people, those two things are mutually exclusive. You cannot have a blame-ridden environment and have transparency. And here's why. If you don't have a blame-free environment, then people will not be transparent. If they think they're going to get fired or strung up or lambasted publicly, they're not going to be honest. And that's why politicians lie so much, because they don't want to be held accountable to not just the voters, because the voters can be very forgiving and understanding, but it's your opponent taking something that you've done and spinning it in a horrible way and putting it into a 30-second ad. And that's why our politics have gotten so dysfunctional. So if we want to really start solving all those trillions of dollars in unfunded liabilities, we could start by saving lives, saving money in a very, very simple way. But that's going to involve people like my opponent stopping what he's been doing. And that is, he just runs around blaming everybody. I mean, Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama. Let's see who we can demonize next. Most of our problems are 70 years in the making. The idea that one politician, one administration, or one political party is completely to blame for the mess is absurd and irresponsible, and it's just a lie. I mean, let's just start saying, this is the problem. I don't care how we got here. Let's just solve it.
Now, here's the thing that I feel you're going to fight is, in my opinion, people don't vote based on facts.
No.
They vote based on feeling.
Yeah.
And like right now, and we talked prior to going on the air, there's a definite feeling in the air of let's throw the bums out.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of these
Agreed.
people and all that kind of stuff. And it's not necessarily based on any facts. It's just this feeling that people have that the entrenched political oligarchy, the entrenched political class is just screwing over the average person.
Yeah.
Now, the problem that I think you're going to run into is the fact that all of those things were great, but I guess if you go up to people and they have the attention span of a squirrel and you say, well, what are you going to do? It's like, well, we're going to fix medical errors. It's one of those things that like people like to hear something like, we're going to, like you said, simple. Like we got to get, that's why I think people do attack like, oh, it's Barack Obama, it's Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's the Republicans, it's the Congress, because then people can process that quickly. What you said is like real stuff. That's what you actually would do the first day. Substance that you do. But I guess the question then comes is, do you run into people and have a problem when people sit there and kind of go, that, it's one of those, I just can't imagine someone carrying a picket sign going down the street going, fix medical errors so we can include processes. That's what made the Tea Party so powerful, was because it was so simple. It was, hey, we're spending too much money. Let's stop spending so much money, because that's essentially all they are. They're not a political party. They don't have like an opinion about like
ideologues.
Ideologue. Yeah, they just want to spend less money.
Yeah,
and that's simple. I mean, are you running into that? Or
no? I mean, when I'm actually, we're having a really substantial conversation right now, and
we'll stop that soon.
No,
don't worry about it.
But when I'm out talking to regular voters, and Donald Trump is probably going to win my district handily, not just win it, but win it well. That's the way it is. And I don't have a problem running against what he's standing for and worry about how that's going to affect me, because so when I'm talking to a regular run-of-the-mill sort of low information voter, somebody that isn't really engaged in what's happening because they're paying the bills and they're going to work and they're getting the kids to soccer practice, they'll come up to me and say, so why are you running? And I usually start out with a joke. I'll make a joke and they'll laugh.
What is the joke?
Well, one of my big ones.
Okay, I'll be the low information voter.
We're gonna role play.
Okay, role play. Hey, Erin. Why are you running for Congress?
Because I want to speed on the turnpike without repercussions, insider trade legally, and get C-SPAN to implement a 7-second delay.
You got my vote.
Exactly.
You got mine.
That's exactly what happens.
Hell yeah. I want to. That means you're going to swear and stuff, right? That's good. I like that.
Yep.
Yeah, you and me need to go get a drink. But
and that impression is very real.
But that, like, to me, we've had the conversation, and I love to have substantive political discussions. But one of the things that always gets me upset is I've talked to people on both sides. I've talked to the Fox Chapel businessman who is to the, would make Donald Trump or Mitt Romney seem like they're, John Lennon in terms of their, and then I've talked to the left leaning person who's, marching, to end suffering in the world. And then I sit there and usually what happens is I talk to the person and they're like, well, how do we, engage and make the economy work better for people? And they'll talk about an idea that might actually be for the, well, tax breaks. And I'm like, well, okay, that's more right.
Sure.
Or someone will sit there and say, well, we need to infuse, money into the system. I'm like, well, that's more left. And then when I really talk to the people that actually know what they're talking about, they sit there and say, Mike, the answer is both.
Yeah.
The answer is neither or both, or it's which situation at that particular, which, solution could possibly work there. Now, one thing, we are on Facebook Live. If you have a question, you can go underneath, and our producer, Brian, will, if there's any good ones, will bring that up to Erin, because Erin's here till 11 o'clock. So I guess the question that I have from there is so how do you, though? I mean, obviously a joke is a way to,
Sure.
loosen that. But how do you decipher that down to make someone understand exactly? Because it's very easy to just demagogue someone.
Yeah.
It's very easy to sit there and say, it's that guy's
Yeah.
fault. And you're right. It's 70 years. It's an entrenched system. How do you then get to that low information voter to sit there and say, hey, this is what's actually happening, and this is how we could actually fix it?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. So yesterday I was talking to a firefighter. He's also a union guy, so I saw him at Labor Day. But he said, so I live here, I'm in your district, I'm also a firefighter. And I know a lot about that area. So the first thing I said was, well, I know that one of the things that you guys are struggling with is your congressman will not get you any support as far as funding. Our first responders are really struggling to get, especially the volunteer first responders in the smaller areas, in the small communities of this district. And I said, what I want to do, because this district has experienced 4 years of a congressman that will do nothing, literally will not do anything as far as funding, because that's fundamentally who he is and what he believes in. He said he was going to come in and strangle and starve this district of resources, and he is doing that. He's keeping to his promise. I said the first thing I want to do.
That's the first thing that you. That's a nice thing. You know
No,
what?
that's not
On one hand, he does stick to his promises.
No, that's not what I say to them. I'm just giving you some background to how
Okay.
I respond.
Okay.
So what I said to him is, well, one of the first things I want to do is when I hire my staff in my office, I want to hire a grant writer. I did grant writing with the Institute of Research, Education, and Training in Addiction. There are grants galore out there that you can get. I want to bring a grant writer in. We're going to have a one-page application for anybody in district. Top priority will go to anything having to do with the drug problem and first responders. So write us a one-page application. Tell us what you need. We'll put a full-time grant writer on it. And I can actually pay the grant writer out of a small percentage of the grants that we get. So I don't even have to do that with taxpayer dollars. And we can get the first responders everything that they need. We can start getting funding for our drug problem, so we can start doing some prevention work there. The first responders are drowning in that. So that's my solution. And I gave him, that's my answer. I'm not saying I'm going to get you earmarks and taxpayer dollars, because I'm not going to be able to do that as a first-term congresswoman. But what I can do is use my resources, my experience, and my expertise to find a way to bring soft money in. There's a ton of it out there. I'm just going to flood this district with as much soft money as I can get to it. And we're going to work 24 hours a day making sure that we get these people the resources that they've been dying for.
Okay, everybody always talks about the first 100 days.
Yeah.
So let's okay, so first off, grant writer.
Yep.
All right.
Bingo.
Give me some other, what are some of the first, you show up to Washington, you take the oath of office, first 100 days, what else are we doing?
And then I leave and come back to the district.
Well, that is one thing that you mentioned, is that you will be coming in, if you get elected, doing many town halls and speaking to the people, and your opponent right now, you say, isn't doing that.
He refuses to do a town hall because he's afraid of people. He does these little coffees that are at 10 o'clock in the morning, or sometimes 7:30 in the morning. No working person can go to that. You used to have town halls. They wouldn't let you get away with not having a 7 p.m. town hall where your constituents show up, they yell at you, they say what they think. That's the gig. That's what you're signing up for. And to have a congressional representative, to go from Jack Murtha, who was in the community on a regular basis, interacting with people, was never afraid of somebody getting in his face, to have somebody like this that refuses to do it is appalling. So there's a lot of people that want to scream and yell about where Washington is, and they want to feel like they have a voice. He has left them with no voice. He shuts down the government. He frequently goes home early. A lot of times people will call his office and want to know where he is when he's technically on the clock, and his office will say, we're not at liberty to disclose that. Most of the time he's just in a coffee shop where you can't really go in and scream at somebody in a coffee shop if you're
You
angry.
watch.
Yeah.
I'll do it. I'll do it. Yeah, but okay.
Yeah, town halls across the district. Lots of town halls. Grant writer, start communicating with every commissioner in the district to start building a countywide drug task force so we can start coordinating a very, very effective drug control policy inside the district. So we need to start doing some work with the schools, getting really cheap drug testing to parents so they can start drug testing their kids.
Now,
as a
that's one
preventative
thing you
measure.
brought up. You want to make it that individual parents can you'll be, where would they get them, like at the school or at the what, like?
We'd have to come up with where the best distribution site is, and I want to work with the commissioners on determining that, because I don't know just yet. I want to work with those local people and see if we want to work through suppliers like LabCorp and the other companies that do that kind of work. You can get those tests relatively cheap instead of the $40 ones in Rite Aid. So I want to make sure that we cut a deal through the school districts and maybe get some grant funding. So we have very cheap drug test access to everybody in the district for every parent that wants to drug test their child. And the reason that we do that is because a child who is actively being drug tested, when they encounter the opportunity to use, is more likely to say, I get tested, I can't. I mean, you've probably met people who say, I can't smoke weed because of my job, I get drug tested. It's a preventative measure and it's very effective.
I'm a comic. I don't meet those people.
I don't meet those people. I mean,
in previous lives I did, but now this current one, no. Yeah, this one actually, they're like, I'm the weirdo for not doing it. But okay, so drug testing for kids. What else? I mean, what else in the first 100 days?
I think if I pull off all those town halls, start working with commissioners on a drug testing policy, setting up strategic partnerships with labs, and hiring the grant writer and getting grants going in the district for first responders, I think that's going to be a productive 100 days. Those are my top priorities.
Okay. Now, one thing to keep in mind now, you're sitting there saying I won't be calling you at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday and saying, oh, I'd like to speak with my congresswoman. And she's like, no, she's at a Starbucks eating a scone.
No, I don't eat scones.
I'm not exactly sure what a scone is. I've eaten them and I still don't even understand what they are.
No, I'm not a big sweets person.
Is it even a sweet?
I think it kind of is. It's like bready.
It literally, every time I hear the word scone, I believe I'm like eating a rock or something
cookie.
like that.
Is that what a scone is?
I don't know.
Cookie?
It's some sort of pastry. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think you can add chocolate to it.
It's the worst. It's the worst name for a thing ever. It doesn't sound appealing. Like if I had a thing.
Sounds
of
like a PennDOT mechanism, something that they would do on the roads for.
Oh, we're sconing the road.
Yeah, exactly.
That actually does sound like a thing. Yeah.
Slow down, we're scoring the road. Now, in speaking of in terms of Congress and everything like that, so like let's get back to.
No, I want to be accessible. To your question, I want to be really on the ground, accessible, all over the place, so people can come up to me in public and yell if they want to, voice their opinion. I really want to be accessible.
Now, get back to, okay, so you met the woman who knows how to make a person a congressman, which is what I always said when people, like when George W. Bush ran for presidency and someone said like, well, I don't think he really wants to be. I really think that what happened to him was like the people that make you president was just like, we're
hanging out with them.
Yeah, we know how to do it. Do you want to do that or keep owning the Texas Rangers? And he's like, oh, hell, I'll be president.
Yeah, sure.
Now, so like they sit there and say, okay, I know the person. Is it then at that point you fill out forms? Do you have to send in a check? Do you have to like get your driver's license photocopied at Kinko's? I mean, what do you actually have to do to run for Congress?
Yeah, you do have to file an FEC report the minute that you raise or spend $5,000. So we had to file with the FEC. So we actually have a federal PAC that is now, we have to report every quarter. So it's like every 3 months, and I have a compliance officer that I hired, and you have staff that you obviously have to pay, and you just start building a race.
And then you do have to get signatures, right?
You have to get signatures to get on the ballot.
Now, how many signatures?
1,000 is what you're required to have.
Now, as I understand it, your opponent in the primaries had an issue with your 1,000.
Yeah, he did. He filed a petition challenge against us. It was so much fun.
I mean, why was it fun?
Because I love a challenge. If I get bored, I'm not near as functional. I like when I really start going on something. And my best friend is one of the best election attorneys in the state. So this was an opportunity for him.
Again with your friends.
Yeah, it was.
I have a bunch of comics. If I sat there and I said I want to run for Congress, it'd be like, yeah, dude, you should.
Well, this is somebody I met after I got into politics, but so I get to work with him on this, and my opponent knew nothing. You want to talk about people that come into this and know nothing about politics. He had no idea what he was doing. He did not hire an election attorney. The attorney he hired was actually a malpractice attorney to run a petition challenge, which was absolutely entertaining in the courtroom. And he went after committee leaders, union leaders. You can't do that. You can't file lawsuits against the entire infrastructure of your party and expect to get anywhere. It was the strangest thing I'd ever seen, and it was really hilarious. He actually said that I forged my husband's signature. My Aunt Mary Kay, who's my godmother, who lives in district, he said I forged her signature. He said I forged the former McCandless committee chair, who's also a donor of mine. He said I forged his signature. And the best thing about that guy was he signed it at a committee spaghetti dinner in front of my opponent. Like, he was standing right there. So,
Still doesn't prove anything, Erin.
No, it was pretty hilarious. Yeah, bringing that guy into court saying I signed it in front of you, you jerk. But yeah, it was very entertaining. I had a blast. I learned so much. We were running around like crazy, putting funny stuff on Facebook, having a great time with it. And in the end, he dropped out of the race.
Now, Erin,
I ran uncontested.
I'm getting your campaign person's watching over that. You're blocking.
Oh, sorry.
See that, to me, that's one of the frustrating things about politics, is because you've been giving us great insight on what you would do, everything like that. And the only note I've gotten from her from a text is the mic's blocking her face. that's politics too. Because to me, I believe that's what has to be frustrating is you go in front of a group of people, you give an articulate speech about something about drug abuse, about how to get grants into the area,
empowering the middle class
and everything like that. And then someone what did they think? They liked your hair.
That happened to me after a debate. I got done with a debate, and it was our Johnstown debate, and I knocked it out of the park. I was so proud of myself. Keith Rothfuss, we have video of him running out of there. He wouldn't even do interviews with the press because it did not go well for him.
I assume that when he looks like he's running, he looks like the kid who'd get picked last in gym class. Like, he doesn't look.
I've seen the inside of a locker once or twice.
Yeah, he doesn't look like a guy who'd be he doesn't seem like a guy that would athletically flow. He just looks like he'd do this kind of very upright running position.
Like the Tom Cruise run, only much slower.
Very much so, but not as athletic and not as dreamy. But all right. So
this woman came up to me after my debate and said, "I don't like her eyeshadow." That was a thing.
So for an hour, she heard a debate between two people running for Congress, and her
gripe was
note,
my eyeshadow.
Her note was the eyeshadow.
Yeah, she said that my eyeshadow was glittery, and she didn't like it. So that
wasn't Congresswoman-y.
I guess.
You can't have glittery eyeshadowy, and if you're on C-SPAN, that's all anyone would. They'd have the C-SPAN guy be like, "Here is Erin McClelland from the District 12 of the state of Pennsylvania. Yes, her glittery eyeshadow is distracting everyone in Congress, so they voted no." No, that's.
No, I'll be running through the halls of Congress dressed like a 40s pinup, freaking everybody out.
You know what? Then come on, let's go for to see that. Just to see that go through Congress. Now, one thing that comes up, and we've talked about this off air, is, it really isn't. It's still in 2016. Obviously, you have the first woman running at the top of a major ticket in Hillary Clinton, but there still is a lot of just the old boys network, and just.
Oh yeah.
Can you, don't name names, do whatever you want to do. But what is the most, when you sat there and went, are we really sitting here in 2016? Is there anything that you've just been like, I can't believe someone did that, said that in this day and age?
Oh yeah. I have been slammed into a wall once with somebody, a donor trying to kiss me, all that kind of craziness happens. Yeah. They're groping, sexual harassment. People say horrible things. I had somebody a donor throw a $500 check at me and tell me not to come back till I started sleeping my way to the top. And a big issue with raising money in this process as a woman. So you're asking very powerful men most of the time for money. That's the donor process. And a lot of those men, well, not a lot, but some of those men will want something in return. And when you say no, their reaction is then to say horrible things about you to other people, because men that are used to getting everything they want don't like being told no, especially when it's a young female that's telling them no. So as a young woman, you can get a lot of sabotage in the donor base that none of it is real because you've said no to somebody who's very wealthy and very powerful. I mean, I have some of the most interesting things on my phone that you could possibly imagine, from, you know, people that have sent me pictures of their anatomy that was completely unsolicited, and I have a nice collection of those, and unbelievably inappropriate text messages.
This is why Colin Kaepernick didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, because of the stuff like this.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm not shocked, but like someone who's running for the Congress of the United States and you send the person a picture of your genitals.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
That's a thing.
It is a thing, and it's a sad that it's a thing, and we have to end that it's a thing.
Yeah.
And we have to go from there. Now, one thing that we also brought up, and you brought up earlier, is that Donald Trump is going to probably win, or is going to win your district pretty handily.
Yeah, he is.
Now, yeah, from a Democratic perspective, you're sitting there going, now, how do you view that in a sense of, you know, someone would sit there and say, you'd hope that if it was a heavy Democratic district that you could kind of ride the coattails into office because the Democrats would show up and everything like that. But so the question is, do you understand why your constituents would be voting for Donald Trump?
Yeah, I do. And I think that I've found a way to tap into the sentiment that is the underlying cause of that. And make it work for me. And that is, it's a very anti-establishment. I think a lot of these people look at Donald Trump and they say, listen, we are bleeding jobs in this district. We've seen at least 5 plant closures in this district since I've started running for Congress. They have nothing. There's nothing moving forward. Their schools are overrun with drugs. Their abject poverty level is unbelievable. Cambria County is one of the highest poverty levels in the state, and they have a massive drug problem. And they look, and the right has failed them, the left has failed them, and they look at Donald Trump and they say, here's a guy that's flipping off the entire establishment, and for that. So that allows me to sort of take this fiery Irish character that I have and just sort of go out there in jeans and a flannel and shake people's hands and be real with them and sit down and have a beer with them and just have honest conversations about what's happening. And I love that part. I just love being able to be genuine and knowing that people are really embracing that. And that's a contrast. While my opponent is tying himself to Donald Trump, and he really is, I don't think the people that really like Donald Trump are going to really like Keith Rothfus when they meet him. I have met a lot of Trump supporters, especially in labor, that say, I'm supporting Trump and I'm going to support you because I think that you two are going to be a trip in Washington together. And that's what I'm playing on. You know, that I don't have to support Donald Trump as far as they're concerned. And a lot of them are pretty understanding about why I don't support him. But at the same time, I'm respectful of where they're coming from and why they're so upset. You have people in Cambria County that my party is calling stupid because they're going to vote for Trump. And they're not stupid. They are disenfranchised white males that hear people, liberals in the East End, lecturing about white privilege all the time. They don't feel privileged. They're struggling to feed their families. They're struggling to put a roof on their head. So this idea of white privilege is completely absurd to them. And I can empathize with that coming from a blue-collar background.
Well, I mean, now you understand why, you know, the term white privilege comes from the fact that, you know, but you're saying, and now in terms of economics, personally, I look at the situation and I sit there and, you know, obviously everyone's talking about, you know, foreign competition and all these kind of things. How can you, I mean, it sounds like to me, especially Donald Trump, and obviously this could be very popular in certain parts of Western Pennsylvania, kind of want to turn back time.
Yeah.
They kind of want to sit there and say, hey, let's make it the 1960s again when we were the workshop of the world. And I look at it from a businessman standpoint who sits there and says, hey, if someone's saying that I could make it in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, it's a $2 unit cost, or I can make it in Vietnam and it's a 25-cent per unit cost, as a congressperson, how do you change that? I mean, obviously you could sit there and say, well, you know, we can redo trade agreements. We can redo this kind of, I mean, is that how we help that? Or is that just kind of the boats down the river type deal?
I think there's a lot of things that we can do, and I don't see anybody doing any of it. First of all, when you have congressional leaders that don't go out there and talk to the community, they're not talking about the real problems that we're experiencing and saying, okay, so this is what we're dealing with in Washington. This is how it's affecting the state level, and here's how it's affecting the local level, and here's how I'm going to help you. When you have somebody that will not do a single town hall, they're not being educated, which means that you can get them to vote on bizarre things that are not really attached to reality because they're not getting real information. Another thing that you can do is you can decide this is where things are naturally going, where the consumer process and supply and demand are naturally going. And you can work to thrust that forward as an economically viable way as possible, or you can hold it back. I think Keith Roth he talks about a boom all the time, but he's done absolutely nothing and shows no real comprehensive understanding of the economy as a large, complex, adaptive system in a way that shows he knows how to do that. So, for instance, in this district, it's a big coal area. And his answer is to just sort of pretend coal is what it was 30 years ago. It's not the same. That doesn't mean that we can't find new jobs for some of those workers through training, through expanding our base for how we do energy in this country, production of windmills and things like that. That's all steel that can be done in these steel mills. You can do hybridization in our coal-fired plants that doesn't require them to completely change over to a different power structure, but allows them to slowly clean the coal process so we can still use it, but do it with clean capture technology, which is very expensive right now. So we have to talk about, are we going to invest in that? Keith Roth doesn't want to do that. He says he supports the coal industry, but he's not actually promoting anything but sort of this Stone Age bedrock mentality. And he wants to keep Mr. Slate in charge of everything. And it's ridiculous. You have to start moving forward and understanding that the biggest part of the war on coal, yes, there's environmental regulations that are making it hard for them, and I'm all for addressing that. But the biggest war on coal is gas. It's cleaner. It's the boom. We are sitting on the Marcellus Shale. And here's a great example. The Department of Energy did a cradle-to-grave study on the environmental impact of taking our natural gas, our liquefied natural gas, and shipping it to Europe and Russia and China for fuel. And what they found, and this would create jobs, it would create infrastructure, and it would be a massive increase in the purchasing and the export of our natural resource. I mean, this is an amazing idea. This was a DOE study. This was not the EPA. And it was I read it. It is a true scientific...
Department of Energy.
Department of Energy, yeah. True scientific cradle-to-grave study that showed the environmental impact of using our gas versus their coal is half. It creates jobs, it creates infrastructure, and it's a massive economic boom for us. This is inarguable.
Okay.
He passed an amendment to bury the study. And then went into the Pittsburgh Business Times and told everybody that he did it because the study was going to create undue regulation and administrative burden on our gas industry, when it was actually scientific data that showed that we should start exporting LNG.
Now, one thing that was brought up, my sister is a lawyer in the natural gas industry, and I was talking about where we are right now in the natural gas industry.
Okay.
And essentially what she said, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially we know it's down there.
Yeah.
We know how to get it out. But right now, we need to get the pipelines to get it to places.
Yes.
Now, that's something that President Obama has stopped and been opposed to. Mm-hmm. Now, if Hillary Clinton gets elected, a lot of people feel that will continue. Would you in Congress go against your own party's leadership and say, no, we need to get these pipelines so we can get these, so we could start shipping natural gas to ports and get all that kind of place?
It would depend on the policy. I'm a the devil's in the details kind of person, and I hate to ever say I'll support or be against any policy until I read it. And then you want to look at environmental impact. But absolutely, I want to see that infrastructure built. I want to see, because natural gas is a much cleaner fuel supply. So I'm all for it. And it's one that is unbelievable in my district. I mean, we are dropped dead on the Marcellus Shale. We have the new cracker plant in Beaver County. So this is a great opportunity, and it's something that I want to see move forward. I don't want to hurt anybody. We absolutely are responsible in the federal government for making sure that we protect the safety and wellness of the American people. But that doesn't mean that we can't find cleaner ways to do it. I support the Center for Sustainable Shale Development, which has 15 standards of a combined effort toward zero contamination of air, water, and ground. Well, I'm all for that. Shared learning. This is half environmentalists, half gas companies. They worked together and said, let's do it better, cleaner, and more efficient than everybody else. And I love that. That's the American way. Let's do it better. Let's do it cleaner. Let's do it more effectively. Let's find the inarguable goals that unite us, get past the partisan ideologies that divide us, and make this country what we know it can be. So
now, one thing that's coming up, especially in your district, but all throughout Western Pennsylvania, is right now, over the last 30 years, our population has declined.
yeah.
And now in certain parts of the city, in certain parts of the area, it's peaked up and everything like that. But one thing that is said that if we don't, especially with now baby boomers retiring, if we don't get a heavy influx of workers over the next 20 to 30 years, Western Pennsylvania is going to be in a terrible position economically.
Yeah.
Now, one place where people say that needs to happen is immigration. Now, what is your position? Like, are you here to tell people that, because that's one thing, especially in Western Pennsylvania, we've lagged behind, because if you go through our areas and even go out to Philadelphia or out east, we're one of the least diverse areas in terms of Hispanic and Latin American immigrants in the entire country. But if we're going to become the 21st century is going to become something that Western Pennsylvania can be proud of, we need to attract those immigrants. What is your position on immigration in terms of are you building the wall, or what are you doing?
No, I'm not building a wall. I have too many farmers in my district to be building the wall, and that's the biggest thing with immigration that I look at. Is I'm very, very for buy local when it comes to food. I'm very concerned about the safety and security of our food supply, and I want to protect farmers because I just think it's a healthy way. It's a business that's there. It's been around for hundreds of years, and it's just a beautiful thing, and I absolutely have so much affection for that. So immigration is something that our farmers need a comprehensive reform policy on because they use migrant workers, and we've tried. Georgia tried to ban migrant workers, and they lost millions of dollars in product because people didn't take those jobs. A strawberry picker is a highly trained skill. It is not something that you just walk into a field and start ripping stuff off. And it's also back-breaking work that's being done for like 18 hours a day by migrant workers that come here legally, do the work, and then go back home to their families. We need that because you're going to be paying $13 for a carton of strawberries if you don't have that. And I don't think the average person that says, they're taking our jobs kind of thing, I don't think they're understanding what your food costs are going to experience.
To me, I think this is what they're interested. I mean, obviously that's one area that the farmers on both right and left sit there and say that this is key. But one thing is like, okay, they say, all right, they open up a giant windmill factory in Johnstown.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, an influx of immigrants come in, and they will work for $8 an hour as opposed to $20 an hour. And then all of a sudden, yes, there are more jobs here, but now I can't get them because this guy's willing to work for $8 an hour. I mean,
yeah, and I don't think that's the way you're going to see it done here most of the time. You're going to, because we have so many young people coming out that can't afford to go to college, and there's no opportunities for them. So you can staff those facilities with local labor. Now, yeah, the issue of minimum wage is definitely an issue.
Are you for a $15 minimum wage?
Progressively, yes. I don't think you get it tomorrow, but eventually, yeah, you have a progressive process in place that slowly elevates the minimum wage and keeps it up with inflation. And that used to be a Republican principle. Davis Bacon and the living wage, those were Republicans that realized when the middle class has more money to spend, they buy more of our friends' crap. That was a fundamentally intelligent, business-minded, bottom-line focused idea. And now that we've decided that cheap labor and keeping workers below the poverty line, which is completely absurd. When you want to talk about welfare reform, let's talk about the fact that once you get to the point where you're making $12 an hour, it's more like $11,000 to $24,000 a year. In that gap, as you're making more money, you're actually seeing your standard of living cut because your ability to get certain subsidies from the U.S. government drops so significantly. That has to be fixed. You're actually penalizing people for making more money by taking away services from them, and you're decreasing their quality of living. That's ridiculous. Nobody should work a 40-hour work week and be under the poverty level. That's unconscionable to me. I don't understand how you hold on to that and say that makes sense. And I honestly would love Keith Rothfuss, who does not support the minimum wage raise, to live off of that for a week.
Now, one thing he would probably sit there and say is that, the only people that typically are on the minimum wage are teenagers, and it's their entrance.
And that's a lie. That's not true. And he says that. And you can have exceptions in the minimum wage. You can say, look, if you're under this age, or, if you have a business under this size, we do that with the Fair Labor Standards Act. We do it with the Affordable Care Act. There are certain exceptions for smaller businesses or businesses of certain size. You can do that, but you can't have large numbers of adults with families making minimum wage. You just can't do it. It's completely irresponsible, and it's putting more burden on our entitlement process. The Congressional Budget Office, which is bipartisan, has shown that if you raise the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour, you will immediately pull 1 million people off the welfare rolls. 1 million people. You will eliminate about 500,000 jobs that are under the poverty level, and they will be replaced with more jobs than that are more stable and above. But it'll take some time to transition. I'm for that transition. I really am. Keith Rothfuss reads the first paragraph of the CBO report and talks about this 500,000 jobs that are going to be lost. He doesn't read the rest. He literally doesn't read the rest. And you have to actually get to the end of the report, Congressman, to find out that you're going to pull 1 million people off welfare. And I'm all for that. And I'm for creating better jobs, better paying jobs that are longer term and not short term. And we have to transition from these short, cheap jobs to long-term, stable, well-paying jobs. And that's what raising the minimum wage would do.
Okay. Well, we're at 11 o'clock, and you have a busy day. You're not going to sleep for the next 2 months.
No, I'll sleep after November 11th. That's fine.
Now, okay, so what we're going to do is I always call this, in sales, it's the parking lot pitch,
Gotcha.
Which means I'm getting into my car, you're standing there, and I'm screaming, hey, why should I vote for you? Give me the parking lot pitch. Go.
Because I'm going to show up a lot more than the guy that's already there. I'm going to work really, really, really hard. And we're going to really solve some problems. And I'm not going to rely on doing that in Washington. I have a lot of great ideas that we can do right here on the ground in district and not have to worry about any of the gridlock in Washington affecting our ability in Western Pennsylvania to start moving us forward.
Now, if you were a comic, I would say, where are you performing? But let me just where can, like, website?
Website, Erin4PA, ERINFORPA.com. And then we have a Facebook page and Twitter page that are both Erin for PA. So check out the website. I have a blog, so it's pretty in your face and pretty direct. So if you really want to know about how I feel about things, including my opponent's fundraising emails, check out the blog and check out the website and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Now that's probably what, PG-13, that blog? Do you?
No, I don't swear on there. Not too much.
Not too much. Thank you very much, Erin.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike Sasson, Mike Sasson Show. Next week we'll be back to talking about nothing. This was our government service for the week. This is what I had to do here. Again, thank you for Erin McClelland. My name is Mike Sasson. See you next week. Bye.
You like Kanye West?
Not really anymore. He doesn't smile. He's so miserable for a rich guy.
I know, right?
Right? Smile, dude. You got money, good-looking woman. Like, what does it take to make Kanye laugh? Hookers for everybody. Eureka!
Yeah.
I found it! The nugget of gold!
Hey, Money Bags. Tune into Funny Money at 7 a.m. Thursdays.
Did you hear Tom? He said 7 a.m. Tune in.